Hi, and welcome to another segment of How to Live Your Best Life with me, Dr. Paul Meschino. Thank you for joining me, and hopefully you can hear me. It's just a funny story. My son took my earplug, and he's not home, so I don't know where it is, and I'm just trying to, hopefully you can hear me on this video tonight. So I'm going to speak a little louder, a little clearer, and hopefully you can engage with me on this. So welcome everybody, and as you all come online, I'm happy to see everybody as they come online today. Now last time we spoke, and I did a video in July, we talked about and I shared 3 of the most powerful ways to get through life's adversities that actually work. And there are more than 3, just so you know, but I shared 3 of them. And I got some really great feedback. People got a lot out of it. They found that they improved their life in some way. But then I found that some people were said to me things like, "Well, oh, hi Donna, how you doing? Hey Donna, if you wouldn't mind, can you give me a feedback whether you can hear me clearly or not?" And just let me know if that actually works, because I've lost my earbuds. My son has them and I don't have them. Anyhow, I just want to see if you can hear me clearly enough, or do I need to speak louder? Anybody else online, let me know as we go through this. But I'll continue anyhow. Let me know as we work with this. So I'm going to give you a wave. Great. Okay, so yes, you can. Okay, great. I feel much relieved. Okay, super. So I was just sharing how I shared last time about how to I can see you and hear you. Okay, great. Thank you so much for the feedback. Great. Hi, Maddie. Okay, I see people coming online now. This is awesome. I can hear you fine. Good. This is great. Okay, super. I'm just hoping that it stays like that. Okay, anyhow, so I was mentioning last month, we talked about the 3 most powerful ways to transform or to recover from life's adversities that actually work. And I shared that with people, and I got some great feedback. But some people said to me things like, "Well, all that stuff in the past, well, I'm over it, right? All the stresses in the past, I'm over it." And I said, "Oh, that's great." But when I probed deeper, I realized that they weren't really over it, and they weren't even aware that they weren't over it. There's more healing to go there. So that's why I want to present to you tonight the 5 most common myths that lead you to believe that you're over it, but you may not be over it, and may be keeping you stuck without you even knowing it. And I want to give you a prime example, and I want to use this example because it's one of the most common scenarios I come across. And that is when people get hurt by other people's behavior. Someone said something, or did something, or didn't do something, and you feel hurt by it, right? And you think you're over it, but you're not really over it. So let me give you an example, right? People say to me, people have been through a breakup or a divorce and say they're over them, but they're still holding on to some past hurts from the relationship, but they don't really acknowledge it. Or when people have grievances with immediate family members, such as a mother or brother, sister, father, son, daughter, in-laws, whatever it may be, and they say they're over them, but they're not really over them. And I can tell that because I can ask them a question, and very simple, and say, "Listen, that person you say you're over it with, if they were to sit down with you in front of you today on a one-on-one right now in your house or wherever you are, would you feel any type of emotion stirring up inside you?" Yeah? Or if I talked about those incidents of the past that hurt you, and you go back there, would it still drop emotions within you, stir up things like that within you, an upsetness or something? If that's the case, then you're really not over it. I mean, you may be working through it, which is awesome, but there's maybe something left that you're still not resolved with that person. And you may look really good on the outside, you may look okay on the outside, but on the inside, you're feeling some of these things when we talk about those incidents of the past. If that's the case, then what's happening is, it's not sitting in your consciousness, it's sitting in your subconscious. You're not completely aware of it unless we bring up the subject. And it's when that happens like that, it manifests or festers within you as tensions and compressions within the body that create eventually havoc on the body, causing illnesses and disease and disorders. I've seen back pain, neck pain, headaches caused from this. I've seen even cases of asthma or digestive issues, or even contributing to things like cancer. And if you want to look at the research on that, I look no further than the book by Dr. Gabor Mate, When the Body Says No, who goes through the scientific literature to describe this mind-body connection and how it actually manifests. And in his research, it shows that it's not the major events in life that actually cause us our illnesses and conditions, such as the loss of a loved one or loss of a job or something. It's actually the minor stresses in life, the things that niggle away at you over time, that actually contribute to more of these illnesses and diseases that happen in the body. So it's really what's happening in the subconscious that manifests in the body, not so much what's in the conscious part of us that we're consciously aware of most of the time. So it's important then it's crucial to identify what's niggling at you, what's those gut feelings that you're having that are still sitting there that are turmoil for you, right? So if you can deal with the niggles, if you don't deal with the niggles that are niggling at you, okay, what happens is if you don't deal with that, you ignore it, then it becomes an issue. You get an issue. And if you ignore the issue, you get a problem. And if you ignore the problem, you eventually get a full-blown crisis. It escalates. So it's important to identify the things that are niggling at you, things that are unresolved, and resolve them. So I want to present to you tonight the 5 common myths which fool people into believing that they're over these past hurts, but they really may not be sitting in their subconscious, manifesting as problems within their bodies or within their relationships or in their life. And how to work through that to some degree. I'm going to describe that tonight, but I want to go through the 5 common myths. Okay, so let's start. So the first myth is people think they're over because they say they let it go, right? That's very common. Now, in my clinical experience, when people say they let it go, in my experience, they got more to go, okay? No pun intended, all right? But when I realized that you can, and you may get that advice, just let it go, right? In my experience, when you come across these hurtful events, if you can work through it and transmute it, but if someone really hurts you significantly, then it's hard to just let it go. Right? If that happens to me, I find I'm hurt. My emotions are going, and I just can't let it go. And so I find that with other people too. For those people who do say they let it go, then I ask them this question. I say, well, okay, if a new person came into your life that treated you like that person in the past did, would it still upset you? And they treat you exactly the same way, would it upset you today? And if it did, then they really haven't let it go. They may have let go of the person of the past, but they haven't let go of the judgment of the person of the past, okay? And it's the judgments that's the crux of the matter, not the person. That's a common myth to understand. It's the judgment of the person. So there's more to go if you're in that state to work on the judgment, not just the person. So that's myth number 1. They believe they just let it go, okay? Myth number 2 is some people believe that they're over it because they can identify that person's misbehavior. They didn't realize what they were doing before, but now they see it clear as day, right? There's an old adage that says, I once was blind, but now I see, right? So in this state, you kind of go, oh my goodness, I see how they've been treating me and what's been going on. And you can tell your spouse, you can tell your best friend, how they treated you and how you fell into that, the misbehavior that they did. And you can perhaps say that, oh my goodness, you realize I've been a survivor of abuse, right? And now just because you can say that, and that's a great start, it's a great realization to have, great awareness to have, but just because you can say that doesn't mean you're complete with them, doesn't mean you resolved it. Even if you confront them on their behavior and they apologize, you still may not be over, because if they did it again, would you still be upset? Yeah. If you were, then you really got more to go there. Besides, I find that confrontation with a person who has been treating you poorly over a long period of time, and you confront them with it, usually doesn't go well. Okay? It's usually met with denial. What are you talking about? Or defense. Well, I did my best with you, or whatever. And then you want to get the point across so they get it, so you speak louder and then they speak louder, and then you have this whole thing going on that really gets unresolved, right? How many can identify with that scenario? Yeah. So we come across these scenarios. Now, just because you get it and they just don't get it, you conclude that they just don't get it, but you get it, still doesn't mean you're over it, right? There's a common misbelief that just because you get it, that it's over and that you feel complete with them. It's a great starting point. It's a great awareness to have how you get triggered by them or how you get hooked in to their behavior. But it's a good starting point, but there's more to work on there. Okay? Which leads us to our third common myth, and that is people believe they're over because they now feel better because they cut them out of their life. Right? They have minimal or no contact with that person, and therefore it's resolved. Now, setting a healthy boundary like that is actually a healthy thing to do. Okay, it can be a really good thing to do because it keeps you safe. It prevents you from getting hurt over and over and over again, right? So that's a healthy boundary to set sometimes. But don't confuse a healthy boundary with resolution and completion with that person. Instead, I want you to focus on, until you do the inner work necessary to sort of transmute these old wounds, it's common to keep attracting people into your life which will treat you the same way or similarly. You know, having similar experiences with different faces is how our subconscious works out old wounds of the past and old hurts of the past. So it's important to keep continuing, while you have that healthy boundary, to work through these hurts of the past so you can free yourself up from these hurtful experiences. So that brings into us the common myth number 4. The fourth common myth is that you think you're over it because you've given it time, or time will heal it, or time has healed it. And this is a common advice we get from people. Oh, just give it time and you'll feel better. And in a sense, that's kind of true, because in the heat of the moment, you feel the sting of the emotion and the turmoil within you. So in the heat of the moment, you may want to give yourself some time, and the time allows your emotions to settle, to work through, to process the emotions. Because when you're in the emotion of it all, you're in your lower brain function, you're in your limbic system, and you're just feeling all these emotions, either anger or sadness or hurt or fear or whatever it may be. You need to let some time go to allow your body to process, let your mind process the emotions, so that you can return back to your higher centers of functioning, right? The higher centers of the brain function, to think more clearly through it. So having time, giving yourself some time, is actually a good thing, but it can also be your greatest enemy. Because if you just think that time's going to heal you, then what happens is those emotions that have been sitting in you and just festering underneath the surface, that may be causing disempowerment for you, such as feeling hopeless or helpless, can wreak havoc on your body, as I described earlier, and cause problems in your body. So time alone is great, but time in essence is great, but time alone is not the be-all to end-all that it's made out to be. It takes away the sting of the emotion, but then it's time to start now creatively thinking through it, right? Clearly thinking through it. Which brings us to our fifth common myth, and that is what I call the fallacy of forgiveness. When we were children, we were taught to forgive those who did us wrong, and to say sorry if you did anybody else wrong. And that's great etiquette, social etiquette. I agree with that. It has a place. But when you come across a scenario where that person did something wrong and hurt you, and you forgave them, and then they did it again, and then you forgive them, and then they do it again, and you forgive them, or you did something wrong, and then you say, I'm sorry, and then, oh my God, I did it again, I'm sorry, oh my God, I did it again, I'm sorry. Well, then forgiveness becomes virtually ineffective. The ironic truth is that you're not complete with somebody until there's nothing left to forgive. There's no judgment left. So forgiveness is a stepping stone to the path of completion and resolution, but it's not completion or resolution. So I want to address, what does completion or resolution actually look like? So you know what it feels like, what it looks like. You get an essence of this. And to do that, I want to share this with you through a story. And it's the story of the Dalai Lama. You may be familiar with some of the story. As a teenager, the Dalai Lama had to flee his country because the Chinese invaded the country of Tibet. And he had to flee, otherwise he would have been murdered, along with his bodhisattvas, his inner tribe. And because it was such a strict communist regime at the time, they had a no religious tolerance. So they wanted to actually squash out the practice of Tibetan Buddhism. And if you were caught practicing Tibetan Buddhism, you'd be actually thrown in jail at the time, tortured. A lot of people actually died as a result. There was an uprising against the communist regime. They got wiped out, they got murdered, they got killed. Okay, there's horrific incidents that happened. This all happened in the 1950s. Now in 1997, I can attest this because in 1997 I actually visited Tibet. I did a tour and just studied Tibetan Buddhism. And this one time I recall that we were behind around the Patala, which is the house of the Dalai Lama that lived, all the Dalai Lamas preceding to this one, that lived for centuries. And we were in this beautiful set of gardens. And in the garden was a small little temple. And in that temple, we came across a Buddhist monk who was meditating and going through his rituals at the time. He saw us and he invited us in. It was really kind of cool. And we went in and he smudged us and we were going to do this meditation. But before we did the meditation, he secretly went under in a little box underneath the drawer, underneath his desk, and he pulled out a picture of the Dalai Lama. And he showed it to us and we were all like, oh, beautiful. And I realized that he showed it secretly and he put it back into that little box and he didn't have it on display because if he was caught in 1997 with a picture of the Dalai Lama, he would have been thrown into jail and tortured at that time. So even at that time, it was taboo to even consider following the Dalai Lama. And so, anyhow, now today I'm sure there's much more tolerance for it, but back then it was like that, and maybe it's a little more tolerant today. Now let's flash forward to today. In one of the Dalai Lama's recent talks that he gives, one person stood up and asked him this question. He said, well, how do you feel about those horrific incidents about the Chinese when you left Tibet now? How do you feel about it? And it was a poignant question. So do you think, he said, well, I just let that go? No. Do you think he said something like, he explained how he was a survivor of the abuse of a nation by the Chinese and how those people were really abusing the Tibetan people and abused the country, and he's a survivor of that, and that's what he said, and that's how he got through it? No. Do you think he said, well, I feel fine now because I just cut the Chinese out of my life. I don't talk to them anymore. I don't speak to them anymore. That's how he resolved it? No. Do you think that he said, well, it's been a long time, all that time has gone by, I really feel like I've healed it because, it's been so long ago? No, he didn't say that either. Do you think he said, well, I've forgiven those people for all their wrongdoings? He didn't even say that. Or do you think he looked deep into the actions of the Chinese and he found empathy for his aggressors and his oppressors? And do you think from that point he asked higher quality questions of himself? What's the greater purpose for all this happening? How can I be of service to my countrymen? What can I do now that I'm in exile from Tibet? Well, he must have done something like that, because when a person asked him, what do you make of the horrific incidents of the past with the Chinese? He alluded to the fact that, first of all, he was lighthearted. He didn't feel any type of seriousness or emotions or anything like that. He's this jovial self and just kind of like smiling, right? And he goes, well, when you give up judgment, right, of the incidents of the past, and you open your mind up to other perspectives, most commonly you come across and find the positive reason for even the worst of incidents. He addressed the audience and said, listen, he says, you Westerners in the audience may not know this, but you would not have received the great wise Tibetan Buddhist teachings if it wasn't for the Chinese invading Tibet. And I had to flee. And because I flee, I started to speak and to teach the people of the world about Tibetan Buddhism and the way of peace throughout the world. Instead of being a little teaching that would have stayed in a little country of Tibet, a little corner of the earth, affecting maybe hundreds of thousands of people, it's now affecting millions, tens of millions of people. It's gone global. Well, that was a whole other perspective that the audience, frankly, just didn't expect. You know, he didn't deny the horrific incidents, but he also acknowledged what the common man could not see unless they looked deep enough. And at that point, he looked like there was nothing left to resolve, nothing left to forgive. There was no letting go of anything. You didn't have to cut anybody off. You didn't have to do anything. He just felt totally like he appreciated it for what it was as it was. Yes? So that's kind of the essence of the feel of completion or resolution. When you get to that point where you kind of go, oh, I see. Yes? And there's nothing left to say about the subject. Yeah? Now, if you find yourself identifying with any of the 5 common myths that I described earlier, then that's great. It means that you're now aware of what may be keeping you stuck from progressing you into your healing. You know, you can't change what you're not aware of. And so there's more healing to go there, more to work on if you want to resolve it. And I suggest that you review and go through the what I talked about last time, the 3 most powerful ways to transform or to recover from life's adversities that actually work. And I'll be sharing more than that with you in the upcoming videos of more strategies, more ways of dealing with these things. And I'll be posting things on Facebook on how to get through these things. So, you know, stay tuned, as they say. Nonetheless, if you're identifying yourself with any of these common myths that I described, then just know that those common myths actually serve a purpose. Okay? If you're in any of the ones myths and you're stuck there, they actually serve a purpose. If you're in letting go, it's great that you're letting go. You're attempting to let go because that means you're distancing yourself from the event or the person. And when you distance yourself from the event, you can actually look at that event from different points of view. From your point of view, from the other person's point of view, from a witness's point of view, and you can see different perspectives on it now. If you're now becoming aware of your blind spots, that's awesome, because then you don't have to fall in the same trap over and over again. If you find yourself being hooked in or triggered, you kind of go, wait, I've been down this road before. I know, I'm aware now. I don't have to go into that whole pattern or that whole thing again. I don't have to go there. If you find that you've cut them out of your life, that's absolutely great, because that is a healthy thing to do. If they keep hurting you over and over again, you're taking care of yourself. You're creating a safe space for yourself, some boundaries for yourself. That's wonderful. If you find that you're giving yourself some time to heal, that's great, because you're letting the sting of the emotions go through you and process through you so you can think more clearly about it. If you're in the state of forgiveness, that's great, because it's a stepping stone to completion or resolution. Yes? So if you're in any one of those places, that's wonderful. But if that's all you do, then those stepping stones have now become stumbling blocks. There's more to work on. There's more to go. Yes? There's more healing to attain. You can get to completion. Listen, I've done it. I've got to completion. I've helped many people get to completion, people I've worked with, and I believe you can get there too. So that's what I wanted to share. I wanted to open up the floor now to any questions or any thoughts that you may have on that. I see lots of people online now. This is awesome. And I'll wait for a bit. And if you come up with any questions even after the video, if you want to personal message me, you can through the Facebook page. And I'll attempt to answer them for you. And yeah, if there aren't any further questions or comments, then as I say, you can personal message me. Stay tuned to the Facebook page, because I will be posting more information on how to resolve this, how to get to completion, how to get to resolution, besides the 3 that I shared so far. And I want to thank you for attending, and thank you everybody. I see everybody online now. This is awesome. And I'm looking forward to seeing you. And I'll be posting again and doing another live Facebook page, Facebook video, I should say, in September, early September. So stay tuned for that. And so I want to thank everybody for attending. And this is me, Dr. Paul Meschino, signing off, saying live your best life. Over and out. Thank you.